Are you looking for a way to advertise your business, offer discounts to your customers, and help veterans at the same time? Then CityByHero.com is the answer. It's your shop local program helping you while providing jobs and funds for veterans. It's simple to sign up, easy for your clients to find your business and your offers, and there are many plans to choose from that fit your budget and your needs. Go to CityByHero.com and sign up today, and we'll make a donation for you to a veterans organization. CityByHero.com.
And now, it's time to Stand for Truth with the host of Stand for Truth Radio, Susan Knowles.
And welcome to Stand for Truth Radio. I am your host, Susan Knowles. So glad you could join us today. Please check out my website at susanknowles.com and the articles I write as a contributor to The Blaze and WND.com. And don't forget that Stand for Truth Radio and a segment I do called Knowles on the News is also available at Spreaker.com or if you just download your Spreaker app. And we are also on iTunes, and I do a lot of videos and post them of my Knowles on the News on my YouTube channel under Susan Knowles and at Susan Knowles on Twitter. So follow me there. Now, today's show is another show that is geared towards veterans and their family members and others who suffer from brain insults. I wanted to bring on an expert in this field and discuss the possibilities for those suffering with traumatic brain injury or TBI. So let me go ahead and introduce our guest and tell you a little bit about him before we get started. Our guest today is Dr. William A. Duncan. Dr. Duncan serves as president of the Patriot Clinics Incorporated, a nonprofit clinic specializing in delivering effective care for brain-injured veterans and others. And you can find their site at patriotclinics.com. Dr. Duncan also serves as president of the International Hyperbaric Medical Association, a 501c4 membership association of healthcare professionals and the lay public who wish to promote the use of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. The organization is very focused on the scientific application of HBOT to all indications where it is helpful, especially the single most expensive public health problem in America, untreated brain insults. Because of Dr. Duncan's extensive background in the public sector, Patriot Clinics and IHMA have been able to help federal and state governments save millions through improved diabetic foot treatment and through restoring lives of those with brain injuries. So I want to go ahead and welcome to the show Dr. William Duncan. How are you?
Great. How are you today?
I am fine. I'm so glad that you could come on and share some time with us because this information that we're talking about is so important for veterans out there. And I wanted to talk to you before we get started. Tell our audience a little bit more about your background and your qualifications in this area.
Okay, I basically have the same education as any of your hospital administrators throughout your cities and states. That's my background. I've got a PhD in political science and economics, and I served for 10 years as one of 34 people who controlled all healthcare spending in the United States. So I had the view from 32,000 feet, and I was above all of the competing interests. So my interest was the effective treatment of people to benefit the taxpayer and the economy. And today we are wasting billions of dollars. Actually, John Eisenberg, who brought evidence-based medicine to this country, the first founder of the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, said it was zillions of dollars that we were spending on untreated brain injury. And I told him that there was no such zillions was not actually a number, and he said exactly this is bigger than any number you could possibly imagine.
Yeah,
and
worse
so
than
he unfortunately died of a brain tumor, which is a horrible thing to happen to that wonderful man. But we have really effective treatment, and I want to give you just one example to give everybody perspective on this. We've treated Charlene. Charlene was a 45th Infantry female POW in Iraq of the Taliban. You can't even imagine what happened to her. She was rescued by the Rangers. We treated her 6 years after she got back. She had been living in her house, unable to leave under any circumstance, with a full-time caregiver paid for by the VA. After the first treatment, she started having relief. By 3 treatments, she wanted to meet one of our patients who had big black bushy hair and a big black beard, whose last name was Anderson, so he certainly wasn't any extraction other than Irish in his case. and she then, by the 5th treatment, was alone in a room with him painting. And by the 25th treatment, she is in truck driver school. Okay? Now, this is a lady who could not walk through our door. Her caregiver took an hour to get her sitting in front of our doctor. Okay? So that's an example, but it's a consistent example in what we see at Patriot Clinics. So when we say we're transforming lives, that's exactly what we're doing. And
let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you just a second, Bill. How many pills, if you can remember, was she on at the time? It's a common
a whole
thing.
bunch, whole bunch, and basically off of almost all of them. I mean, the transformation in these people's lives is remarkable and consistent. But the scope of the problem, you see, the suicide rate of 22 per day, and by the way, in Oklahoma, that suicide rate at 22 per day is 29 per 100,000. It's the actual statistic that your state would have it as. Ours is 61 per 100,000 in Oklahoma. We are twice that national average rate, and it is unnecessary. We actually gave VA this treatment before the war ever started in 2000, when I was working for Congress, when I discovered this treatment. Okay? I mean, this is a treatment for brain injury that's been in existence since 1937. And there's just a report today that 25% of everybody has had a concussion out there in our society, and I suspect it's much higher than that, actually. It's hilarious. We give out a deal that says, please tell us about all your brain insults, and they write down a whole list of things, and we have a couple pages for it. After we do 10 treatments, we give them the list again. It doubles because they remember stuff.
Well, I mean, I can only imagine, and I really can't imagine because I haven't been in anybody's shoes that's had TBI, but to finally be given some hope after you have mountains of pills, and I'm not exaggerating about that. I know you have. I've talked to veterans who are given some like 50 pills at a time to take.
We have one show up with 81.
Oh, gosh. Oh, my gosh. And it makes me it infuriates me so much every time we talk about it. You know, I can and I can't believe at the same time that this is done like on a regular basis. And we all know, well, I'll let you tell us. Why isn't the VA using this, Bill?
Well, the VA is amazing in that the VA has a really thankless job. They've got X amount of dollars. They have Y amount of huge problem, and a Z budget to work with. And so they're shifting everything they can. And their problem is they don't have an effective treatment for brain injury. And so they have publicly stated, we are only going to treat the symptoms of people's problem. We are not going to treat the cause. And by not treating the cause, we have this problem. And I've heard rumors that they're getting bonuses for passing out Ambien. They participate. I heard that there were 21 drugs in the pipeline that if hyperbarics was adopted would stop. And of course the VA gets money justifiably, as DOD does, for any drug patents they participate in. Well, you know, the last time I checked, the patent on oxygen was owned by God. He created all there was, and we just use the stuff, you know?
Right.
I mean, it's not something that we make in our backyard or anything, you know?
Right. Well, and also, you know, they don't even give the correct test to test for TBI. Is that correct? The VA?
Yes.
Has
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Tell us
that's
a
part
little
of
bit about
they're following the Agent Orange model of delay, deny, then you die. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I mean they practice it on Agent Orange. They have been following the same playbook with traumatic brain injury, and they've actually spent literally, I've been told, hundreds of millions of dollars trying to prove hyperbarics doesn't work, and they the stuff they do is amazing to come to that conclusion. And not scientific, because you can't come to a scientific conclusion like that. When we used in our study at Louisiana State University brain imaging, okay?
Right.
Brain
Mm-hmm.
imaging does not have a political agenda, okay?
Right.
It either shows your brain is rebuilt or it doesn't. The Israelis then replicated our research from LSU, Louisiana State University, and they have now built a $10 million facility and are treating 540 a day.
Oh my gosh!
Now,
well, it's amazing.
What's wrong with us?
Yeah. Well, and look at how much money that you just quoted at saying that the VA is using towards proving that HBOT won't work. Why not put that money towards HBOT and just prove, okay, we're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to send people over there, and this will prove it doesn't work. Why not do that? I challenge them to do that.
Yeah.
And they won't do it, obviously, because,
no.
as you know, it's working.
Yeah. Well, and they know it works. I mean, if you really think about it, we have a 95% single treatment cure rate for acute aviation decompression sickness if you treat them the same day. Now, acute aviation decompression sickness is always neurological. If you lose your canopy at 30,000 feet, you got a brain injury, period. Always. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
95% single treatment cure rate if you treat them that day. Okay? If you treat them that week with, let's say, 10 treatments, it's about as effective. Okay? So the actual time to treat them is acutely, and we actually gave DOD that opportunity in the 2009 supplemental bill that I was asked to create by Chairman Murtha at the time. And we would have deployed hyperbarics to the battlefield, treated them there on the front line for $15 million. Okay?
Wow. Right.
You know what they did instead? They bought helicopters. Which is more expensive, helicopters or 4 hyperbaric chambers? I mean, really?
Unbelievable. Well, I look at this and I say, okay, well, they're doing this because they just don't care. And I don't know if that's true or not. That's from my perception on the outside looking in. And I also look at this and I like you alluded to, possibly Big Pharma is getting a benefit, and that's why everything is going on. What can the American public is sitting here going, okay, none of this is making sense. We could save millions of dollars if we just treat these people with HBOT. Let's give it a shot. It can't hurt for sure. What can people do to
Well, they can contact their state, city, and county legislators and tell them, look, we want to follow the Patriot Clinic model out of Oklahoma. Okay? Because here in Oklahoma, I learned a very valuable lesson. I wrote 83 pieces of legislation my first 6 months for Mr. Iztuk, and I lost track after that in my 10 years. And what I found out was when I went back to the original Veterans Bureau Act of 1921, when the VA was created the very first time, what the states were responding to was all of the World War I vets being dumped onto them. Well, trust me, when I testified before the Texas legislature, the Texas Appropriations Committee chairman told me that they were awash in these vets, and it was breaking every state and local government's budgets to deal with these untreated people. And They were also being told that they could not treat them because they were the VA's responsibility. But there's a provision in the 1921 Veterans Bureau Act that says if the state treats them and sends the Fed the bill, the Feds have to pay that bill. Okay?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So now here in Oklahoma, we've actually set up a fund, and we're in the process of finishing the regulation, and we will be billing the VA or TRICARE, depending on which payer that person is responsible to.
Right.
We will be billing them only for treatments that work. That's what our regulation says. If the treatment we use does not actually improve them, no charge. But when the treatment works, it's really irritating. We saved the government $1.2 million on 6 guys. Okay? Wow. And they wouldn't pay a $96,000, actually it was $1.8 million total. They wouldn't pay a $96,000 hyperbaric bill for them, and we had saved their careers. 2 of them were special forces worth $5 million apiece, and 2 of them were truck drivers worth $600,000 apiece. So it doesn't take very much when you see that to realize that the cost savings here of treating them it was actually $19.2 million. Excuse me. The cost of treating them is much less than the cost of leaving them untreated. I was working with Johnny Owens, who's our county commissioner down at Fort Sill and the county down there, and he said every single county, for what you can do, every single county in the nation should be happy to pay for this treatment, especially acutely when it's cheaper. Then they only need 10 treatments. Not 80 is a brain reset, and 10 treatments is acute treatment. And have a car accident, go get treated, and we erase the injury. Have a football injury, go get treated, we erase the injury. It's pretty cool.
Pretty. And let me think like the VA would for a moment. This is going to be very hard because I think I'm more intelligent than that. But let me try. If you say you're only going to charge for those treatments that work, how are you going to prove to them that it worked? Because they're going to say, and I know the improvements are proof enough, but I don't see the VA taking that.
Well, we actually had HR 396 a couple of years ago, the TBI Treatment Act, and it would have done what has happened now and allowed these guys to seek civilian treatment, number one, but it also only paid for effective treatment, and they did not want the precedent established that effective treatment got paid for, because they knew that then that would going to go after the treatments they have that don't work,
right, and
everything would be driven to effective treatment and instead of symptom management. See, once you make the assumption, and this is the assumption they made, and in my long experience in the bureaucracy, it was hilarious because Mr. Isduk, my first day of the job, says, "Okay, Duncan, I'm going to give you authority because you have training in bureaucracy through the Army and administrative law and decision theory. If you find stupidity in the government, you can crush it and kill it." And as an old infantry guy, I went, I'm in a target-rich environment. So wow. I would analyze these things when I was working in the government and even now from that perspective. And so they make the assumption at the very beginning there is no treatment for brain injury. So once they make that assumption, then they have to go delay, deny, then you die, and they have to shift the costs of that brain injury to the person, to the family, to the community, because they don't have a budget big enough to pay every single guy who was injured. I'll give you an example. In Oklahoma, we have the 45th Infantry, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The 45th Infantry officially has an 80% TBI PTSD rate. Officially, that's from General Aragon herself, who strongly supports this treatment. We have saved the careers of numerous officers in both the National Guard and civilian world, and lots of Special Forces guys that, like I say, are worth $5 million apiece. So then you take a look at the economy. There's a category called discouraged workers. Okay, this is some of the numbers that were just been being discussed. These are people who are workforce age, unlike the people who say that number's made up of retirees and stuff. That's not true. These are workforce age who were in the workforce at one point in time and left the workforce because they could not cope or find a job. So this is very much what we see in this veteran population. They get out of service, They take their unemployment for as long as they can. They know they can't work. They then try to use their GI Bill going to school. We have 40,000 in Oklahoma who are on the GI Bill, and most of them are going to be injured from having served.
Right.
So you have this population, and then they do their best to stay in school and that kind of stuff, but when they get done, they still can't work.
Yeah.
Okay? And so transform that into the second guy we treated, the first guy we treated, I should say. Let's go to General Pat Maney. He is very public about this. He is a seated judge in Florida. He's now in charge of the Veterans Court for the state of Florida. Brigadier General, blown up. He was the highest-ranking person, to my knowledge, ever blown up in Iraq or Afghanistan. He was blown up at the beginning of the Afghanistan war. He spent 12 months at Walter Reed getting the very best therapy that they had. They sent him over to George Washington University Medical Center, got him 80 treatments using the correct protocol, thanks to his good friend, Secretary of the Army Marty Hoffman, pushing all the right buttons. And he returned to being a seated judge, and he's still trying cases.
Wow.
Okay? Now, that's the first combat case, all right? Second combat case we treated is the son of a felony court judge in Boston, and he came back. He had a job, ready to take it, but he couldn't leave his bedroom. He was living in his bedroom in the dark because he couldn't stand the light and all that, migraine headaches and all that stuff. So we got him 40 treatments. He went to work in a courthouse for 2 years as a bailiff carrying a gun. He then went back to school, got his master's in public administration, and is now working for a major metropolitan fire department. Okay?
Wow.
That's 16 years later, by the way. So we have the long-term effects of this treatment. Okay? We know what it does over time, and the effects are permanent. Judge Maney is still on the bench. Okay? I get regular reports from the second guy all the time. So the key here is this is available. We just had to have somebody go, okay, I'm tired of screwing around with this. Let's simply do it. Okay?
Yeah, right.
Let's see if the theory works like it should. So we're actually able in Oklahoma, we're doing hyperbaric treatments for about $56 a treatment. And that's with equipment and doctors and all that kind of stuff. We also do, I happen to have learned the acupuncture protocol for PTSD. So we use the two together because the hyperbarics repairs the injury, and then the acupuncture reduces the emotional charge. So it's a two-for. One repairs the biological injury so that then the acupuncture can actually work in two treatments. It's astounding to see these guys. I had the treatment, so I had my own share of PTSD from child abuse. And so I saw this transform my life and turned around and then witness it in these vets, and it's really wonderful. So, and by the way, acupuncture and chiropractic are all authorized by DOD and VA. I mean, I'm not using a therapy that they don't already approve and pay for when they feel like it. And that's the problem.
When it's theirs. when they're the ones getting the benefit and all that. One thing I wanted to ask you, too, when these people go through the HBOT, when they start making improvements, do any of them need to continue or start seeing mental health professionals, or are they just basically – oh, okay.
Yeah, we have 24 mental health professionals associated with our Oklahoma City clinic. They actually bring us their patients. Okay.
Wow.
Because this is really nice to see a welfare family, for example, who may have come from a battered home, drug mom on crack or something, or cocaine or whatever else it might have been, and now you treat them, and they get back the 15 IQ points, and they get back the 39% reduction in post-concussive syndrome for the battered ones, and they have a 30% reduction in PTSD and a 51% reduction in depression, 96% improvement in emotional control. They have those things happen to them, and now they're counselor. As a counselor, can you imagine working with somebody who has a compound fracture of the leg, and every time they step on it, it squirts blood, and so you have to tell them to stay off of it? That's the equivalent of what we're doing in psychology, and I say that as a person with a bachelor's in counseling psych, okay? Mm-hmm. And the reason I didn't pursue my master's or PhD was I was frustrated with what I could see as we're treating brain injury, but we've got counseling tools to work with it. So now, when we treat the brain injury, now we can transform them through the counseling effort by saying, okay, now here's the way you cope with this. We've gotten you a 96% improvement in emotional control, but you've had a habit of going off on somebody before. So now anger management's effective, okay?
Right.
So the tools that we give them are transformative. For example, the vet center here in Oklahoma City, and I'm saying this publicly because they haven't made it secret at all. They are sending us every person that walks through their door. We've treated probably 80 of their veterans already. Okay, and they get a new guy in, and they're in my chamber that night. Okay, I mean by the end of the day they've finished their in-process and they've had their initial, and they come back and go, oh, my gosh, I don't have a headache today. The ones I love are the people, they have horrible, horrible headaches. This actually happened with John Bennett. John Bennett, Representative Bennett Salisaw, is a Marine intelligence officer who was over in theater. Worked at the VA for a long time, and he spoke right after I did at one event. He's sitting there watching my slideshow going, I have all of these symptoms. I have all of these symptoms. And then he got up to speak, and they turned down the lights from my slideshow, and so they flipped them on. He got an instantaneous migraine, and he walks out, and he goes, oh, Doc. He puts on his sunglasses, and I saw that look. Yeah. I'm not going, John, are you okay? No, Doc, I got to take my drugs and go home and lay in my bedroom in the dark for 3 days. Well, it just so happened Kevin Hurtelbrink from Jenks Hyperbarics was there presenting with me on environmental medicine, which is another area I know a great deal about because I oversaw the CDC Environmental Health Sciences Lab for 10 years. Oversaw their budget and stuff, and so well experienced with that. And so I said, Kevin, can you put him in the chamber? He says, sure, I can get clearance from Doc and we can put him in the chamber. And he says, no, Doc, I got to go and take my drugs. I said, no, go with Kevin. Call me on your way home about an hour and a half from now. So he goes with Kevin. He gets treated. And he calls me on the way home. He says, my headache's gone. I said, yes, told you so. About 15 minutes into treatment, right? Yep. And he says, I'm a state legislator, right? Yeah, I know you're a state legislator. What do you want? I said, I want this for every veteran in Oklahoma. He says, you've got it. It took us 3 years when we passed the bill, okay?
Wow.
And now in Oklahoma, we've done 11,000 hyperbaric treatments in the last 2 years. I've just moved the clinic. We have a great family, a Vietnamese war refugee family. They came here when they were 3. And when they found out that I was treating veterans, Vietnam veterans, who saved their family from that hell, they said, I can't give it to you for free, but I'll give it to you for a third of the market rate. And they did. And so we will, when we open, be able to treat 100 a day. Okay?
That's unreal.
And we don't charge them anything for treatment. Okay? We ask the public for donations so we can treat them. And I have people that send me $10 a month, and I have people that send me $50 a month. And you get enough of those added up together, you get 400 people doing that, and all of a sudden that's enough to pay my oxygen bill every month.
Right.
It's enough to pay my lease payment. It winds up being, and that's how we've sustained the operation, is treating these people. My staff gets paid. I take no money from Patriot Clinic at all, other than for expenses, of course, but that's expected. But I live on my retirement, and this is what I do. And it's very satisfying and gratifying to see people's lives. We had an architect come in, and he'd had a stroke, and he couldn't work. And architects make a decent amount of money, right?
Exactly.
And he's very frustrated. He can't work, and he gets 10 treatments, and his wife's going, he's going to go back to work. He's going to go back to work. I keep telling him, wait. He says, no. I said, well, you just keep him coming in, because that's the key. They get to feeling better, and then they stop coming, and they'll have regression if they don't finish their 40 treatments. But he got his treatments, and he went back to work, and sure enough, we get a check from him every month, and he's playing it forward so that we can do this for other people. And that's what we do.
And I think that's what we're going to have to do, because we can't keep looking towards the government all the time to give us the money that we need. It's not going to happen. I think private individuals, like you said, $10 a month, whatever they can do, those are the people that are going to make the difference.
And from that, you see, then you can mug the government. I am very, very good at mugging the government because I was the appropriator and I know how. I used to mug the agencies all the time. Okay?
Right.
And don't make me paint myself blue and come over with my 4.5-foot sword. I only had to do that one time. And I had to do it with diabetic foot wound. I had 4 visits with them, and they finally said, we're not going to approve this. And I said, but it's cheaper to fix feet than it is to chop them off. And they said, well, we can't take the cost savings into account in our decision. Now, I'm the guy that got protective masks for every police officer and firefighter in America, and I'm very proud of that. That was 2 visits, and I was only mean the second time. And I turned to these clowns and I said, when your boss sits down in front of my boss next February, he is not going to be constrained by the stupidity of that thought. They both turned white because we had just taken out NIOSH, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, over failure to do protective masks, okay?
Right.
And so they failed to do that, and the threat was you're going to be fired. And neither one of them wanted to be fired, so they did approve diabetic foot wound, the first new indication in 18 years, back in 2003. And amazingly, we've saved $346 million a year in Medicare by not chopping off people's feet. But the rules they wrote, which I couldn't control, the rules they wrote were so narrow, we're only saving 11% of the feet we could be saving. Now, how's that for dumb? We could be saving $3 billion in Medicare, and we're saving $346 million, okay? So this is how you do it. You mug the government through your elected officials. I used to go to meetings and say, hi, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. And, of course, I got the usual laughs. I'm going, no, I work for the House. I work for you.
I mean it. Right. And now it would be laughed at today, trust me.
Well, it's still the same. I mean, the House works for you, okay? And you're the closest to the House members, and you're supposed to be, okay?
Right.
And I know my House members here. Steve Russell knows hyperbarics worked. He saw it over in Afghanistan, and he was part of the group in Iraq that actually captured Saddam Hussein. He was their commander. So Steve Russell knows it works. Senator Inhofe took my bill, the TBI Treatment Act, to the floor of the Senate twice, only to have the VA block it. And very frustrating, obviously. And not only that, how's this for a while? There's something called the Automated Neuropsych Assessment Metric. It is 98% accurate. It's 98% accurate if you have a baseline. In other words, you took a baseline before you were injured, and then you check it again. This is the very same thing. Everybody in this audience who has ever been in the military had a hearing test when they went in and a hearing test when they left. And so Congress mandated a brain test when you were entered and a brain test when you left. Okay? That's the law. Okay? And the Automated Neuropsych Assessment Metric was chosen as the instrument because it was 98% accurate. okay? And it was developed by some outfit called Oklahoma University in Norman, Oklahoma, about 20 miles from here, okay? And we're co-published with them and stuff like that, and we didn't have we would have, but we didn't have any influence on it being chosen. It was just the right instrument. Well, the Surgeon General of the Navy and the Surgeon General of the Army colluded together and stated that, number one, your intake baseline is now classified. It's a class. It's secret.
Gosh.
It's secret. You can't get your own ANAM baseline, number one. And number two, they refuse to do the second assessment. Instead, they use the PHQ-9, which is, we also use the Public Health Questionnaire 9, which is where the depression scale comes from that we use. People say, well, why'd you pick PHQ 9 and 15? Because that's what the VA uses. That's what we told the FDA. That's what the VA uses. Well, we don't like those. And I'm going, well, you can not like them, but that's what the VA uses. So if we're going to match what the VA's doing, that's what we do. So anyway, they put it out that they do the PHQ 9, and then, of course, they tell them, if you say you have PTSD, or traumatic brain injury, you're going to go to a Wounded Warrior Brigade and you're not going to go home to your family. And they keep these guys effectively living in the barracks, harassed, 4 formations a day for the next, well, we've had them there for years, just warehoused. It's tragic.
The public has no idea about any of this. I mean, really, it's not in the news. Nobody's going to talk about anything like this. And the only time that we're going to hear things about that, what you just said, is when people like you come on and tell the public, and then we can share it and get the news out there. And I think the public is going to have to know a lot more of what's going on. I mean, the public's being told. I think I saw an article today. I couldn't stomach it, so I didn't read it. But it was from the president, who said the VA is healing. And so I know I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe the VA is healing, but the veterans certainly aren't. And you see things like that all the time.
I did VA appropriations for 10 years, so I know the agency very, very well. I know how they think. I know why they do stuff and what their procedures are, which it bothers the heck out of them because I just call them on it. Then you're being mean to them if you call them on it. It's hilarious. I know how Trump feels sometimes. Other times I think, Trump, did you have to say that? Come on. But anyway, it's always entertaining, to say the least. But here's the key here. I mentioned to you, one of the things I learned in the infantry, if brute force isn't working, you're not using enough of it. Okay?
Right.
I mean, when I saw us push a deuce and a half, 30 guys pushed a deuce and a half out of the mud at Fort Lewis, Washington after it had been raining for 2 weeks. And I'm going, okay, if we can push a deuce and a half out of the mud with 30 guys, we can do about anything. I mean, I figured they were going to have to call a tow tank. I mean, come on, and first sergeant, go push that. Okay. I remember the glorious feeling of being totally covered in mud when it took off, because, of course, we all fell forward and were picking ourselves up out of the sludge. But, hey, my mother never let me get that dirty, And so here's what we're doing in Oklahoma. We are simply now, they can't say it doesn't work because I've got 80 guys at the vet center. Oh, by the way, I got them all the way back to World War II. I had a guy, we treated a guy landing on the beach at Normandy. He was so cool, okay? I mean, he comes in, he's bent over, he doesn't recognize who he's with, and here it is, his son and daughter and son and their families, and it was a whole family thing to come in with Dad, and he goes to recognizing them again, and about 20 treatments he's in there, and we use a ionic cleanse foot bath to detoxify people, and all this crud from World War II is coming out of his feet, smoke and all this stuff. And he's sitting there talking to me. He says, Eleanor Roosevelt wanted to take all the Marines and put them into camps and educate us on the beauties of the Japanese culture in order to heal the rift between them. And I went, that was what I hadn't heard before, I mean, I thought I was pretty up on that stuff, and it was like, after they just hosed everybody out of holes with napalm, really?
And you think it only happens today in this administration, but now we're hearing that it's been going on for such a long time, that train of thought. Oh, my God.
And so here our society needs this treatment for brain injury. Anybody who's got a kid out there in your listening audience, and I've known people with 5 or 6 kids, and this one's a doctor, and this one's a lawyer, and this one's a school administrator, and this one's a dud. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you go look at that kid, and of course they lecture him, and they berate him, and they threaten to cut him off their inheritance, and they do all this stuff. And you sit down and say, okay, when did Don have his brain injury? Well, what do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, when did one of these things happen? Car accident, fell out of off his trike when he was 3. Oh, my gosh. When he was 11, he was riding in the wagon, and the wagon tipped over, and he hit the back of his head. I'd never thought about that being the source of my son's problem. There it is. Now today, the guy's 26. Hey, we can put him in the chamber. And the nice thing is, if you can breathe and watch TV and fly up and down an airplane, you can do a hyperbaric treatment. It's tougher than that. People say, well, what are the side effects? There's side effects to everything. I said, okay, can you clear your ears in an airplane? If you can clear your ears in an airplane, or you can clear your ears when you dive, then we got it. If you can't clear your ears because you've been blown up so many times that you don't have eardrums, you have scar tissue, well, we send you for ear tubes. They put the ear tubes in, then you can do it. So it's a straightforward problem. The
right.
risks of hyperbarics, it is a very safe, every 11,000 treatments, we've never had an unanticipated adverse event. And no serious ones ever. No seizures, none of that kind of stuff. The only ones we've gotten are, okay, this guy had a cold today. Okay,
right.
This guy had a cold today, and so he can't dive because. And I've gotten in the chamber when I couldn't. I got to 3 psi one day, and we go to 7, and I just couldn't go past 3. So they treated me at 3. Big deal.
So it sounds like it's pretty much tailored for each individual and what their situation is. And
oh, yeah.
I wanted to ask you, too, before each time, in the very beginning, you do brain imaging or brain mapping on each person so that you can see the before and after?
We do that ANAM test. We do the ANAM test, which is cross-matched, interestingly enough, to imaging.
Mm-hmm.
And it also is cross-matched to IQ. And so when that 15-point IQ increase I mentioned earlier, that was all $1,500 worth of tests plus the imaging, another $3,000. So, you're talking about $5,000 worth of tests. I don't have that kind of budget. We can certainly do that if somebody wants to see, but we use the ANAM, and we're going to be using, I need a $24,000 donation, then I'm getting the BrainMaster quantitative EEG that will actually give me a 3D image of the brain, number one, and number two,
nice.
for acute cases. And this is really important because we want to treat a lot of car accident cases. We want to because you take somebody with a car accident. Understand that when people have a traumatic brain injury, they have a 50% future lifetime loss of income. That is the statistic, and I'm not making it up. This is economics out of Florida. 50% future lifetime loss of income, okay? One single traumatic brain injury. So it's important then to treat that acutely, and I need the BrainMaster so I can stick the electrodes on their scalp and they measure the brain waves, and then it'll show up any fresh injury as a flare, okay? And so then you treat them and the flare goes away, and I can send that to the insurance company and I can go, look, flare, no flare, pay me, okay? And they send me $3,000, and 10 treatments is $3,210 at the Medicare rate. So that's for Oklahoma, and that's I can treat a lot of people for $3,000 when my cost of treatment's $56. So
right. And has anybody ever come in with just PTSD and not TBI? And
you can't.
And had the HPT?
It's impossible.
Okay.
Okay. Now the reason for that is you have to realize that when they made the PTSD scale, we knew nothing about traumatic brain injury. This was 1976. We didn't. I was fortunate. I got there halfway through the decade of the brain, and met with Nobel laureates who'd done great brain work. I mean, it was so cool to be in the position I was in, and see the results of 5 years worth of work, and then fund another 10 years worth, and see the great strides we were making. And when they made the PTSD scale, they simply took this soup of symptoms and created the, I think it was DSM-2 at the time, created the definition of PTSD and created the questionnaires for it, etc. So if you look at the questionnaire, there are 3 mild traumatic brain injury symptoms on that questionnaire for PTSD. So you cannot be diagnosed by the VA with PTSD without having traumatic brain injury. You just can't.
Interesting.
Because you have to score 2 out of 3 of those symptoms, of those PTSD, the TBI symptoms, or you don't qualify with PTSD. So when we did our national study, the NBER study, we were able to show that to the approving body. And so they allowed us then to do TBI or PTSD, because if you got one or the other diagnosis, either one, you've got TBI. Okay?
Wow.
And of course, the VA pays more disability for TBI, so therefore they give PTSD diagnoses because, well, there you're just morally weak. Okay? You weren't man enough or woman enough to take the blast. Okay? That's actually what they told Pat Maney. The Surgeon General of the Army told Pat Maney that he just wasn't man enough to take the blast. And we were hoping when he met him some years later that the general judge had the restraint not to punch him out. And I'm happy to report that no matter how much the judge wanted to, he did not punch the man out. So he was still pretty mad about it, though.
Yeah. I'm surprised he was still standing, to tell you the truth. I wouldn't have blamed the judge one bit. Let me ask you this question, too. If you had somebody who's, let's say, is in Missouri, and they heard about your clinic in Oklahoma, and they wanted to come there for treatment, and you said that it takes about 40 treatments, I don't know how long that would take. How would that work? Okay.
6 weeks, yeah.
Okay.
And as you know, I'm talking to you from the Biltmore Hotel, $199 a week. And so people come for 6 weeks and go back. And we do have the International Hyperbaric Medical Foundation that supports us. And if, let's say, a family wanted to send their son, daughter, whoever to the clinic, they can give a tax-deductible donation to the foundation in that person's name, and then it goes to take care of housing and transportation and anything else that needs to happen so that person can come. And I'm happy to say that Biltmore's 3 miles away. We do plan on getting housing in our local area. Because we're a nonprofit, we do qualify for picking up houses and stuff when they are repossessed by the state or whatever. But we haven't gotten to quite that point yet. But I've got some real estate people who want to help us get housing so that people can stay, but I don't have it yet. So that's the best I can offer them.
And are these treatments every day, 1 a day, 2 a day, for 6 weeks? What's that like?
Well, when they start out, we can do 2 a day for about the first 10 to 16 treatments. I don't like to do them any more than 1 a day, but we do them 6 days a week. After that, the first 10 treatments, what I find is the first 10 treatments gives them the most relief. The first treatment, their photophobia goes away. That's the light sensitivity. By the 5th treatment, their headaches are under control. By the 10th treatment, they can sleep to the night. So I like to give them 10 treatments in 5 days because it just transforms their lives so much. I mean, they get so much relief so quickly. And then we tend to get better compliance. Because if you think about it, hyperbarics is actually a transaction. It's an expensive transaction for somebody. They got to come to the clinic for 6 weeks of their lives, and they come, and it's going to be an hour and a half out of their day, and people can get discouraged. In the second 40 treatments, you have to do them once a day. You can't double up like you can in the beginning. And so we have a lot of people who do complete all 80 treatments, and we have a lot more dropouts than I wish, and that's one of the reasons we're now going to be assigning one of these 24 psychologists is going to be assigned to every one of our patients. And they're going to be able to follow up and say, hey, we noticed you didn't come your last 2 appointments. What's going on? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And help them to understand that in order to maintain the gain, you need to complete at least 32 treatments in order to have the permanent effect with no regression. And we've only got, we've known this since 1998. We've actually known the chronic injury protocol since 1976. So it's not like I'm dealing with unknowns here. In fact, I had somebody say, well, we aren't convinced the 1.5 protocol repairs brains, and they're a competing association to the IHMA. And I said, have you done 11,000 hyperbaric treatments? No. Then would you consider me an expert on this topic? Well, I'd have to, wouldn't I? I said, yes, you would. Okay, and we have had patients that had other issues, like we had a guy with no skin on his legs. Okay.
Wow.
Pretty bad.
Yeah.
Pretty agonizing to live with. Well, that takes a 2-atmosphere protocol treatment for 90 minutes. That's what that condition takes, because it's down on his legs, close to his feet, not a lot of circulation. And we got his skin back, and then we treated his brain injury. Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the 2.0 protocol doesn't repair brains. It just doesn't.
Wow.
And it's not my fault. We've only known that since 1976. Yeah.
Well, one thing I want to ask you too: when you have those people, eventually, when you have them coming there and they can stay like in housing for 6 weeks or whatever, and you have a number of people at the same time, do they ever consider maybe doing group therapy where people can go and talk about how they're feeling?
Sure.
And maybe, okay,
yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
That's the nice thing of having these psychologists on board, and the psychologists our guy that's in charge of mental health is actually an Iraqi war vet himself, and he's Hispanic, and he treats a lot of. We've had quite a few Hispanic patients, quite a few black patients. We've had some very humorous ones, like the guy whose wife worked for Integris, where the hyperbaric chamber was, but they wouldn't treat him. They cut off 2 of his toes because he didn't have diabetes. His was caused by the fact he smoked so much. He actually had a breakdown of the circulation in his feet from tobacco, and not something I ever realized was an effect. But now we tend to treat. I don't know how to say this exactly, and some people may be offended. We tend to treat the throwaway people in our society.
Yeah.
They come to me. I'm their last resort, and they've been to everybody. I've seen some real tragic cases. We had a guy that was in a tornado, had been no sleep for 72 hours, came in, treated him, he slept, and he decided he was claustrophobic. So he could have been treated if we'd had it all set up at Integris, where they have a huge 12-person multi-place that's so big you can, sit there and hold a classroom or have a football team in there. And then he went to OU Medical Center, which doesn't believe in hyperbarics, and he had 9 electroshock therapies.
Oh, no.
And he became a vegetable. He had been a very successful businessman. He was one of the very successful people, and his wife killed herself because her husband was gone.
Oh, my God.
And so now they've got a vegetable and nobody to take care of him because his wife killed herself because she just couldn't stand seeing her husband in this situation.
It's just so sad. I mean, it's like you say, there's so many people out there hurting. So many veterans are out there hurting, and they're not getting the care, and they're feeling very hopeless, and they look towards suicide as the answer. And talking to you today and talking to a guest that I had on a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Carol Hendricks, so many people could be saved by HBOT. We've just got to get the word out there and get people to you and get people to give you donations at patriotclinics.com. And I hope people will go there and look and see what you do more thoroughly, and maybe even come out and talk to you, especially if you're an organization that's looking to donate. Where can I put my money? I want it to go to a very good organization. Go out and talk to Dr. Duncan about this and see if this is right for you and your company.
Well, and the nice thing about it is that we have there's about 40 hyperbaric centers across the nation. We're the only one that's nonprofit, but there's about 40 of them out there that will treat veterans, and they have treated veterans. Carol Hendricks, that you mentioned, has treated a lot of veterans for me, actually. I've sent her people from L.A. when I was in L.A. Because they could get to Tucson and get treated, and she's actually going to be she does a lot of charity work. She's a neurologist on top of it, so having a neurologist treat your brain injury somehow is appropriate.
Exactly.
Dr. Louis Reyna, who's down at Fort Sill as a neurologist, a good friend of mine since 2002, and he's been the neurologist for a lot of our patients, and he sees the transformation and goes, hey, everybody ought to be doing hyperbarics. And so the key is, though, that if you go on to the website there, and it's linked to the International Hyperbaric Medical Foundation, where I'm actually the Vice President of Development as well. And if you go on there, you'll find state-by-state places. Patriot Clinics is Oklahoma, but you'll find Dr. Kendrick's place on there, and you can donate to her. If you're in New York, I believe the place in New York is there. The place in Texas is there. There's about 3 or 4 places in California. There's about 5 places in Florida. So when we get money in at the IHMF, it gets designated. I got a donation for $250, I think it is. It's going down to Dr. Johnson in Dallas because it comes in over the internet, and I get the email and send it to the accountant, and the accountant writes the check, and off that goes. So this allows people. We want people to be treated locally. We can't possibly treat the million casualties from this war. There's 1 million of these veterans from this war, this part of the war.
Amazing number.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and basically, it's easy to calculate. You look at we've had 2.6 million unique people serve, many of whom serve multiple tours, of course, but we've had 2.6 million tour. 40% of them have been exposed to a blast. 98% of those are going to have symptoms. That's just those. I didn't make them up. Those are the numbers. Okay.
Well, and it's like you said. It needs to be treated as quickly as possible in the right way with HBOT, and so that people can be healed, and we're not looking at long-term care for these people and throwing pills at them so that they can stay doped up, really, for the rest of their lives and have no hope.
Yeah. And they don't want to do that.
Absolutely,
well,
they don't want to do that.
They don't want to do it. These men and women answered our nation's call, which means they are not couch potatoes, and they got executive function, and they care about the country. Okay.
Right.
And now this is what happened to them. I was asked to go check for Marines on the beach at Venice Beach in California, and I found not only 30 Marines there. And okay, if I'm a young guy and I can't get married or anything, at least I can look at the pretty scenery on Venice Beach. I mean, I get it, but there were 200 of them there. 200 living on the beach.
It's not so sad.
Yeah, and it's easy. And by the way, we have about 2 years before somebody's life falls apart. So if anybody in the audience here find somebody that had a car accident, get them to hyperbarics as quickly as possible. UCLA determined that a 9-mile-per-hour collision caused unconsciousness, which causes a brain injury. 9 miles per hour, okay?
Yeah, and so what the blast is going to do, and I'm going to unfortunately have to cut you off because I'm going to have to wrap this up. The hour went by so quickly, and it always does when we have a guest with really important information. Hopefully we can bring you back on and we can talk more about what you're seeing in Oklahoma and what's been happening. But Dr. William Duncan of PatriotClinics.com, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. So please go to PatriotClinics.com. This is an amazing organization that can help veterans. And from what I'm hearing from him and Dr. Hendricks, are seeing tremendous success. And I'm telling you, when I see these veterans with PTSD and 50 prescriptions at a time. This is unconscionable, in my opinion. I'm not a doctor. I keep saying that, and I'm sure they have their reasons for giving out these pills. But when you can get off the medications or at least cut them down to, bare minimum, let's do that. Let's get out there. So please go there. PatriotClinics.com. Look at it. Look at the information. If you can, donate. Thank you so much for being here today. God bless you. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you here again next week.